the United States electric grid. It is arguably the most complex machine ever built by humanity, yet it relies entirely on a machine that almost nobody sees.
42. That is the average age, in years, of the substation machines currently running the U.S. electrical grid. And the real problem? They were only engineered to last 40.
5. If one of these absolutely critical machines fails today, the wait time to replace it has stretched out to a massive 5 years. 2,600. Right now, there is a staggering 2,600 gigawatts of new power generation just stuck in line, waiting for permission to connect to the system.
11. Because of this massive capacity crunch, grid capacity auction prices have spiked by an 11 times multiple.
So here is the situation we're facing. Literally everything, from the lights in your kitchen right down to massive AI data centers, runs through one single machine. What happens when it runs out?
That machine is the Large Power Transformer, or LPT. Think of it as a custom-engineered 400-ton steel behemoth that acts as the one and only doorway onto the electrical grid. In fact, more than 90% of all the electricity consumed in the United States has to pass through this specific choke point at least once. And you can't just buy one off a shelf. They're entirely custom-built for their exact location, and they're so insanely heavy they can't even travel on standard highways. They need specialized rail cars just to be moved.
Okay, let's trace the journey of electricity for a second. You see, you can't really store electricity at scale. It has to be generated the exact instant you flip a switch. But pushing city-level power over long distances at a low voltage would literally melt the wires. So inside this exact box, the voltage is stepped way up to hundreds of thousands of volts for the long haul. Then, once it reaches its destination, another transformer steps it safely back down to the 120 volts you need for your home. Without this machine constantly climbing and descending the voltage, the grid simply does not work.
And this is exactly where that 42-year average age becomes genuinely terrifying. Inside that tank, you've got copper windings wrapped in cellulose paper and submerged in mineral oil. But over decades of nonstop service, heat physically degrades that paper. It literally cooks in there. The paper gets dark, it turns brittle, and it starts releasing gas into the oil. Eventually, the insulation fails entirely, and tens of thousands of volts violently arc across the gap. When that happens, the machine is dead.
And when that doorway fails, all the power generation in the world means absolutely nothing. Take Hurricane Sandy back in October 2012. A storm surge breached Con Edison's East 13th Street substation. The transformer yard failed, and arc flashed green across the entire sky, and a quarter of Manhattan just went dark for 4 days. Now, there was power available from generation plants the entire time, but with the substation dead, that electricity had nowhere to go. And the really frightening part is that this exact same type of failure is now happening across the country without any storms, simply from old age.
So against this aging, super vulnerable fleet, we have a massive demand wave crashing down. In just a single 12-month window, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or NERC, saw its 10-year summer peak demand forecast surge by an unbelievable 69%. Even if you account for duplicated requests, that is the fastest acceleration on record, and it's being driven largely by massive new data centers.
In this historic demand is colliding head-on with retiring supply. Looking ahead from 2026 to 2030, region after region is facing high risks for resource shortfalls. The grid is losing firm capacity. Things like retiring coal and gas plants. In the exact same window, it's being asked to add the most load since the 1970s. This historic demand wave is hitting our oldest equipment exactly where the supply is retiring.
Now you might be wondering, why not just throw money at the problem and buy more transformers? Well, because money literally cannot fix the shortage. The supply chain is blocked by 3 distinct physical gates. First up, the core requires a highly specialized metal called grain-oriented electrical steel, or GOES, and there is exactly one single steel mill left in the entire US that even makes it. Second, there's a grueling 7-year permitting timeline just to build the grid around it. And third, a severe labor bottleneck. These transformer cores require up to 50,000 laminated steel sheets to be stacked entirely by hand by trained craftsmen.
And honestly, even if you miraculously secure the materials and the workforce, building the transmission grid is an absolute administrative nightmare. Federal and environmental reviews alone take an average of 6.5 to 7 years before a single wire is strung or a shovel even hits the dirt. Oh, and any single state along the route can veto the entire project.
Right now, the interconnection queue is holding 2,600 gigawatts of capacity, all just waiting for permission to connect.
To put that into perspective, that is exactly twice the size of the entire operating U.S. electrical fleet. And when you factor in that, historically, only 13% of these projects ever actually reach operation, the sheer absurdity of this bottleneck becomes pretty clear.
So, with grid wait times hitting 5 years for these transformers, the tech industry has basically abandoned waiting for the grid altogether. We're now seeing an estimated 40% of all upcoming data center capacity being planned behind the meter. In other words, they are literally unplugging from the grid to survive.
To bypass the grid successfully, these data centers need immediate, constant power. They simply cannot tolerate downtime. So, to guarantee that 24/7 reliability without the grid, 85% of this new off-grid pipeline relies entirely on natural gas.
We're talking about multi-billion-dollar corporate escape routes here. Oracle is deploying up to 2.8 gigawatts of fuel cells across its campuses. Chevron is building 2.7 gigawatts of dedicated gas generation in West Texas, specifically for Microsoft. And xAI? They're running on-site gas turbines in Memphis. This is undeniable proof that the world's most advanced companies are securing their own private power just to bypass the grid's choke point.
But here is the final, ultimate paradox. Thanks to massive manufacturing scale, solar panel costs have plummeted, giving us the cheapest power in human history. But the solar wave doesn't rescue the grid from the transformer shortage. Every single new solar farm, usually built way out where land is cheap and the sun is strong, requires a brand new, custom-built large power transformer just to push that cheap energy onto the grid. So, the cheapest electricity ever made is simultaneously driving the largest transformer order in history.
Ultimately, value in the entire energy system is migrating from making power to moving it. Cheap energy doesn't end the scarcity. It simply relocates it to the machine that nobody sees. But if the permitting takes 7 years, the steel comes from just one mill, and the machines take 5 years to arrive, what happens if that power simply can't move?